Hi, welcome to my art studio. I'm Jordan, and today I thought it would be fun to bring you along as I'm working on my current art project. So right now I'm in the middle of making a bunch of these little cardboard flowers. You might have seen some of these already in the background of my recent videos because I have a bunch of the ones I've already made up on my wall. But I want to make more because I have a plan for what I want to do with these. So I've made this cardboard frame, which is literally just pieces of cardboard glued together. It's not very sturdy, but I was thinking of potentially attaching these flowers to the frame to make like a cool three-dimensional floral frame and then make art to go inside as well. I just thought it would look really cool to have these completely covering this frame. I'm not sure what I'll make to actually put inside the frame, but I just had this vision for a flower frame, so I want to see if I can try to make it. Also, these flowers are just really fun to make, so even if I don't use them for the frame, I will turn them into something. This video isn't going to be so much of a tutorial as just like hang out with me as I'm working on my art project, but feel free to follow along and make some of these cardboard flowers yourself if that sounds fun to you. I've got my cardboard scraps here and a pair of scissors, and I'm just gonna get started. So I really don't measure anything. I don't have any template. I kind of like them to all be a little bit wonky and not the same. So I've been starting with first cutting out the center. So I just cut a loose circle, and I kind of like if it's not perfect. So I'm gonna keep it like that, I think. Actually, maybe that's too big. Let me make it a little bit smaller. Okay, I think that matches the other ones I've made. And now I'm gonna cut out some petal shapes. Just referencing this to make sure it's generally the same size. And I'm just gonna cut out a bunch of these. I cut out 6 petals here, all slightly different sizes. And then I'm gonna use this masking tape here just to arrange these and get them in place. And then I have my hot glue gun next to me, which I'll use to secure all of it together. I'm just gonna tear off a bunch of pieces of this tape so it's ready to go. And then what I like to do is just bend them a little bit so that if you see on this one, like the petals slightly like bend inwards. So I have the flower basically together. I'm gonna cut out another circle. This is roughly the same size, but what I'm gonna do with this is glue it on the back just to make sure everything stays together. But before I do that, I'm gonna add just a little bit of glue to each of these petals to keep them exactly where they are. And here is the finished flower. I like having a bunch of projects going on at once so I can kind of jump around and work on whatever I feel like each day. So in between painting, on the days that I don't really feel like painting, I like doing stuff like this where it's very tactile and like using my hands to make something. I feel like I'm a crafter at heart, and that is never gonna leave me. As much as I get into the more like art world, I will always go back to like cutting up cardboard and paper and gluing it together and making stuff just because that's what I love. I love constructing things with my hands. Also, it is so fun to make art out of trash. I love transforming something that would otherwise be thrown away or recycled and turning it into something beautiful. It's just so fun. That's like what I love about art, is making something out of seemingly nothing. Also, I love using recycled materials to make art because it makes me feel more free to experiment and try things out because I don't feel so precious about the material itself. Like this cardboard was basically free. So it just relieves a lot of the pressure to make something perfect and gives me more room to play, I guess. And here is another one. Okay, so now I've made 4 of these cardboard flowers. Now I think I'm gonna go ahead and start painting them. I've been painting these flowers with this off-white color paint that I mixed. This is almost gone, so I'm gonna mix a little bit more. Here it is, I just refilled this color. Also, side note, if you're interested in how I mix my paint, I talked all about it in my last video, so go check that out. I'm just gonna give these a coat of paint and then I'll figure out what I wanna do with them next. I feel like it's really important to let yourself play with art materials like this because I think that some of my best work has come from those times when I had just a random idea that I decided to try out. So like these cardboard flowers. A couple weeks ago, I just felt like I needed to make flowers. And a lot of times those random ideas will pop into your brain, and if you follow them and see where it leads you, then you might surprise yourself with what you make. The magic of making art is getting those random little ideas that seem to be like silly and meaningless, and then you follow them and see what they lead you to. All right, these are pretty much dry. So now I want to add some beads. I have these cheap plastic beads from the craft store, and I kind of like how these look. I've tried them out already on some of the flowers I had already made. This one is really nice and sparkly. I filled it completely in, and I kind of like how that looks. But I think this is my favorite way of doing it. I tried orange and then also the clear beads, and I think this is what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna do this ring of beads on all the flowers that I just made. I do this just a little bit at a time. So start with some glue and then lay the beads on. That way the glue doesn't dry too fast. I have considered painting designs on these flowers instead of just keeping them white. And I think that could look really pretty. But I'm keeping them white for now only because I want to make them into a frame. And I don't know what I want to put inside the frame yet, but I feel like it'll already be busy enough with just the flowers themselves that I don't want it to be too distracting with a bunch of different colors as well. So I think it'll look really good if all the flowers are a nice neutral color. And it will be so easy to go in and change the color of these if I want to, so I'm not too worried about exactly what they look like yet. So another thing I'm thinking about for the frame is I either want to plaster or paper mache the frame, just to make it a little bit more sturdy, since right now it's just pieces of cardboard taped together. And I want this eventually to be an artwork that can hang on the wall and is nice and like substantial. So I'm thinking either paper mache or plaster will be the way to go. I bought this paper mache clay, I guess. I forget what it's actually called, but I think it's like paper pulp, and you mix in water and then it turns into kind of like a clay that you can make stuff out of, and then you let it dry and it hardens into like what you know as paper mache. So I've been experimenting with that, and I've made a few things, and that's been really fun, but it's really heavy, so I'm not sure if that's going to be the best thing for the frame if I want it to be on the wall. And last week I bought some plaster cloth to experiment with. If you've never heard of plaster cloth, it's essentially like strips of cheesecloth that is coated in plaster. It's dry, so you dip it in water, and then it's just like paper mache. You can lay it, like drape it over whatever your form is, let it dry, it hardens, and it works just like paper mache. I had never tried it out before, so I tested it out last week. I had a berry basket that I had recycled, and I coated it in the plaster cloth and then let it dry, and it hardened, and it made this nice little basket. And it feels pretty substantial and sturdy, so I think that's going to be the way to go because it ended up being really lightweight, much lighter weight than the paper mache that I was using. I might end up plastering that frame today actually, just so I can go ahead and let it dry because I'm really eager to attach these flowers. I want to see how that's going to look. And here is the last one. I just started laying out some of the flowers on the frame just so I could start seeing how this is going to look. And I'm liking it so far. I definitely think the next step needs to be to plaster the frame just because it's so flimsy. So I think I'm just going to do that now. The plaster does get quite messy, so I need to clean all of this up. Here is the box that I made last week with the plaster cloth just to test it out, and I was surprised by how sturdy this feels. I'm really liking the plaster. This obviously does still need to be sanded and smoothed, but it looks pretty good otherwise, so I'm eager to try this out for the frame. Let me show you how you use this stuff. So this is what the plaster cloth looks like, and I just cut it into strips. I'm going to cut a bunch of strips because once you get going, your hands are wet and you can't really cut more. So I want to have these all ready to go. I'm also going to cut a few smaller squares just in case I need that size. So here's my frame. I am thinking I might do this on the ground just so I have enough space and also make it a little bit easier to clean up. I think I'll just lay out a bunch of paper on the ground. All right, I am on the ground now. Hopefully this angle works, but I am just going to get started. So to plaster, all you have to do is take one of these strips and dip it in water. I have this bucket of water here. And then you just lay it across your cardboard. Let me show you a close-up. So this is what it looks like. And I just smooth it out the best I can and continue layering. So I do have two problems potentially to figure out. First of all, I don't know how this is going to dry. I'm going to have to figure that out because both sides are wet. So I don't know what I'm going to do about that. And then I'm also concerned that it might warp as it dries, and I really want this to be flat. So we will address those problems when the time comes. This is one of the reasons why I'm so thankful that I have this studio space now, because I would not have been able to do this project at home in my tiny apartment with my two cats running around. It just would not have worked out. Just having this freedom to try out anything, and I don't have to worry about making a mess or the cats getting into it. It's just been incredible. This actually doesn't seem to be warping much at all. If anything, I feel like the heaviness of the water is weighing this down, so I might not actually have to worry about the frame warping. I don't know. I just have to let it dry and see what happens. I just put the last plaster strip on and the frame is looking really good. I actually think I'm just going to let it dry here on the ground because I'm afraid if I lift this up that it will rip since the cardboard is now soaking wet. So yeah, I think I'm going to let it dry here on the ground and then we'll see how it turns out. Here's a close-up if you're curious what this looks like. So I only did one layer of the plaster cloth. I figured once it dries I can see if it needs another one, but it's looking good so far. I think that's going to be it for this video just because I need to let the frame dry and that will probably take a few days, but I'm really excited for when it's finally dry because then I get to add these flowers and start seeing how it all comes together. I also need to figure out what I'm actually going to put inside the frame because I haven't thought about that at all, but I am excited for how this is going and I will keep you guys updated. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed hanging out with me here in the studio and I will see you next time.